Yeah. Okay, so this is going to be a preview of my workshop on Vue 3 and API consumption. Um, so first of all, this is a workshop I'm going to be teaching at the PyraHacks um, hackathon that's happening. It starts tonight at 4 p.m. And it goes until tomorrow night at I believe midnight, and those are in Central Time. And there's more information about that at PyraHacks.com. PyraHacks.com. Yeah. All right, so let's get started. We're going to talk about what Vue is. Vue is a framework. Thank you. We're going to talk about what Vue is. Vue is a framework. Why you might want to use a framework, and all the building blocks that go into that. So let's get started. So what is Vue? Vue is a JavaScript UI framework that includes single file components, hot reloading, virtual DOM, and automatic reactivity. So single file components are just individual building blocks for your application. We'll talk a lot about those later. Hot reloading is just a feature that allows you to automatically reload a site if you make changes to any part of it. Virtual DOM is a separate structure DOM from the actual browser's DOM. That stands for Document Object Model, by the way. And then we have automatic reactivity, which means if you change a variable in your JavaScript, that variable will update in your markup. Okay, so here we go. So let's continue. How do you use Vue? There are two ways you can use Vue.js. One is from CDN, a content delivery network. So you can use that if you're just wanting the basic functionality of Vue in an already existing web page. Or you can do it in a Node.js development environment, which is what we're going to be doing in this tutorial because it allows us to use single file components and lots of other super neat stuff that the CDN version does not allow. We're also going to be using Vite. We won't be touching that much, but you should know that Vite is a bundler, which means it's designed to package a bunch of code up and turn it into something that the browser can read easily and can load quickly too. So let's get started. You can go on a machine, local machine, and run these commands, or you can go on Replit. You can go to this link and clone that template and work online. So I'm going to be working on a local machine since I'm most familiar with that. So we will open a terminal in Visual Studio Code and run npx dgit and then all of these commands. Go into the cloned repository and run npm install, npm run dev. I've already done that actually, so when you run npm run dev, then you'll get this link right here. And if you open that up in Google Chrome, then here you are. You have this app. You can see our URL /home there because we're on the home page. You can go somewhere. You can go to the 404 page right now because that's all that's built in. So this is all just placeholder code that we will not actually be using for now. Okay, so let's continue. Once you have this set up, let's talk about single file components. So single file components help break up large web apps into smaller pieces that can be reused. You can nest components inside of each other, keep them on multiple pages. It's just a really easy way to scale an application without getting like a really messy code base that's hard to work with. And there are also a few other concepts, mostly we need to talk about props, that are very important to understand in order to use Vue.js correctly. So you can find examples of single file components on those locations in the screen if you're following along. All right, so here's an example of what single file components might look like. So you'd have a component for a page, but then you might have a navbar component, and you can notice that that's on both pages, but it's the same component. You might have this search bar component. We might have a button in our navbar, but look, we also have it right here outside of the navbar. So that's just a quick illustration of how single file components can work and make an application more structured. So, here's what a single file component script looks like. So this is the definition script. So you can notice that we're using export default here. Export just means that we can get to the component from another file. And without that, there wouldn't be much of a point, honestly, in having these components if we can't access them from other files. And then, next up we have name. So the name is just the name of our component. That's not necessarily required in Vue.js. However, it is required in our setup at the moment if you cloned the template, because the way I have it right now is components are auto-imported using a plugin. So previously, you would have to manually import those, but it's automatic as long as you set that name parameter. Then we can talk about data. Data is where we store variables that our component needs to be able to access. And then there are props. Props is where we define variables that can be passed down from a parent component to a child component. So let's see an example of props. So here we have our template, which is the main HTML markup of a Vue.js component. So let's say this is the parent component. We have a component, and then the prop, it looks like an HTML attribute. So we can see my prop, I'm a prop passed from the parent. And then we see that's component name. So that's the child component. That prop can be used directly in markup with this template syntax right here. So yeah. And in fact, all HTML that's normally valid works inside Vue.js templates. And props and data can be rendered inside a components template using double braces, yes. So here's what that would look like. And you'll notice we cannot see Vue progressively render the data in props because it happens way too fast when the component is loaded, or we call that mounted in Vue.js. So let's talk about what we're actually going to be making. So today we're going to be building a front end that will present data from a Corn API that will be built in a previous workshop. Again, this is just a demo of a workshop that I'm going to be doing tomorrow. And if you want to come to PyraHacks, then you can go to PyraHacks.com. It's going to be a super fun hackathon, lots of cool sponsors, benefits St. Jude. So, we're building a front end that will present data from the Corn API, so I've already have an instance of that built. So our goal is to make permanent pages for specific facts, a page that will get random facts, and a search page that can help us find facts. So, first, let's go ahead and edit the Navbar component. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over. We're going to add some page links using Vue Router. So I'll switch over to my code, and we'll go ahead and open this folder, documents, code, user workshop demo. Okay. There we go. Okay, it closed our terminal. I'm going to have to rerun that command. Okay, we can put that away for now, mostly. Okay, so let's edit the navbar component. Navbar source components navbar.vue. Alright, so right now we have this placeholder text. Let's go ahead and use a router link to not files, fact. Fact random. And then we will put random here. So this is just going to be our navigation, the way we can move between pages. So search page as well. Alright, forgot to put the slashes there. Search. Okay. So now this is our navbar. Let's go ahead and ensure that that changed. Yeah, so we have our links here. Now, the router link component is used in place of regular anchor tags so that Vue router can do stuff like transitions and better navigation than the browser has built in by default. So we'll make some new files, source pages fact.vue, source pages random.vue, and source pages search.vue. Actually, we're not going to make this random page. We're not going to make the random page. That needs to be taken out of my slideshow. Haven't gotten around to that yet. Alright, so let's make these. Let's make file.vue, no, not file, fact.vue, and search.vue. Now, if you're using an IDE like Visual Studio Code, then it'll be easy. You can do Vue. Let's see here. Vue, I believe there's a shortcut for this. No, there might not be a shortcut for this. Vue, yeah, there we go. So now we've got a template here and a template here. We can save both of those. All right, cool. So we'll walk through setting up component data and props in just a few minutes. So we have to tell Vue router about our pages. So we're going to open the router file. We can find that at source router index.js. I'm going to go ahead and close this for simplicity. Alright, so you can see we already have a few roots here, the home page and the 404 page. So let's go ahead and copy that, and we can just paste a new one, and we can make sure that fact goes to pages/fact.vue, and then search can go to /search. Now, if you'll notice, right here, we have path fact/:id. So that is actually what we call a dynamic route, which means if we go to /fact/3, we can get to the third fact. So we can get to that by its ID. So that makes it really helpful. So let's go ahead and implement that. So fact/:id. Perfect. Okay. So let's go ahead and build a fact page. Okay. So on the fact page, we can hit export default. Make sure we have a name for our component is fact. Okay. Now in between the template, let's go ahead and add a main element, and then we can add a div. Now we're going to build out conditionals. So conditionals. Vif is a directive that you can use to conditionally render. This means that that div will not be shown unless the fact object exists, which it won't yet. So if we do this right, that div should not show up. So div vif equals fact. Alright. Alright. Save that. Perfect. Alright. And next, you can see that we're using template strings here, just like JavaScript, to access properties of an object. Any valid JavaScript code can go inside of template strings in Vue.js. Alright. So let's continue. Let's go ahead and write this code out. H1, that's a header HTML element if you're not familiar with HTML. Let's do fact, number, and then we can use Vue template strings like this, and we can type in our fact.id, you can save that, and then we can put a paragraph element here, and put our fact.text. Perfect. Okay. And then this is the VElse clause to the earlier VIF statement. So just like in JavaScript, you might write if else, we can write if else in Vue just as easily. So let's go ahead and So in this case, our else, since it's not going to be showing this div, we can show a different div, the else, with just some loading text. H2 loading. So now, if I bring this over and I go to localhost/fact, let's see here. Looks like it didn't set up our router correctly. Right. It has to be /fact/2. Okay, and you can see we have this loading indicator that we're loading. Alrighty. So now, continue writing this. So, here's kind of what our data will look like. And mounted here is a function that's called whenever a component becomes visible. Remember, we referenced the mounted function earlier, and we'll use it to fetch the right data for this fact. So, let's switch back over to your code editor. Okay. So, we've already got the name here. Let's do a data. Data is a function, and it has to have a return value of a JSON object, and we can put fact, and set it to null for now, because we don't know what the fact is. And then we can have a mounted function, and this function holds the code that runs whenever our component first starts. So, alright, so here's what it looks like. So, const id equals this dot $root dot params dot id. That looks really complicated, but it's really not. So this just refers to the component we're in right now. $root just refers to the root we're at right now, which is our URL. Params is an object that we can store different parameters in. So in this case, we can get the ID parameter because we set that up in the router file. So then, if the ID exists, then we're going to run all this complicated code. Is it actually that complicated? No. But the fetch function in JavaScript can be hard to understand, so let me break it down. This first line, we have a URL that we want to make a web request to. So in this case, it's my already existing Corn API. Then we have our ID is interpolated in there, which means we put our ID in that URL, so the ID that we're trying to get. And then, whenever we have that request finished, then we want to convert that result to JSON, which is an object, so we can actually read that data. And then we set the fact to the data that we already got. So it's really not that complicated. If we don't have an ID, then we're going to just redirect to the home page, just for sake of making things not complicated. All right, so let's go ahead and implement that. All right, so constant ID equals this dot root dot parameters dot ID. Then, if the ID exists, then fetch to the Corn API that I built earlier, currently being hosted on oracle.it, just because I haven't put it anywhere else yet. ID. Then we'll have a then statement, which waits for that to complete, convert the response to JSON, and after that's completed, then we will take the data, and then this.fact equals data. Perfect. All right, and then if we don't have the ID, then this.router.push home. All right. Whoops. Okay, so this is all of our basic code. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this. If all goes well, our the fact part should be working now. So the way my current Corn API is set up is a little bit weird. So I'm gonna have to take a weird ID. So if I I take a weird ID and put it in there. Let's see here. Okay, it's not working. So let's do some debugging. This is my first time running this workshop.
What's wrong?
Okay, so my issue here is that I don't have it set to work cross origin. So that's a me problem. I'm gonna go ahead and fix that. So let's go to let's go ahead and fix this. Da, da, da. Okay, let's see. Gotta fix that. Okay, so this should work correctly. Okay, let's go ahead and see if this fixes it. Yeah, okay. So look, we have this fact and we can retrieve it by its ID. Right here, this is fact 30,303. That works correctly. Okay, so let's go ahead and add the rest of our logic here. So, build a search page. So, in this case, vModel is a two-way attachment from an input to a variable. So in other words, if you change the value of the input, then the variable changes. And if you change the variable, then the input value changes. It's a really easy way to make forms in Vue.js. Super cool. We also have event listeners on components and elements rather than in the script section. So if you're familiar with the JavaScript principles, modern JavaScript, you generally would write document.addEventListener or input.addEventListener key up. But instead of that, in Vue.js, to keep things a little bit simpler, we just hit @keyUp and then the name of the function we're going to want to call. Then we have this v4. V4 is a for loop. It allows us to loop over elements in an array. So here we create one list item element for every item in the results array. So yeah, and then here using this router link :2, that makes the putting a colon before an attribute makes it a JavaScript expression. So that's why we have these template strings there. Oh, and there's a typo there. There should be another template string there. That's my bad. I will fix that in the actual code. It should work fine. So let's build it. Let's go ahead and open the search.vue page. Make sure we have a name. Search. Okay. Let's go ahead and build it. So we'll have a main element. Then we'll have a div element. Input type equals search. We don't need a name and ID for this case. All right. And then we'll have a list of search results. All right. And let's add a v4 to that. And then fn results. And we're also going to need a key, which is it's a little more complicated principle. I probably won't explain that right now. I probably should explain that in workshop. I'll have to think about that. Okay, and then here we can have our text, wait, actually I forgot, we're going to link the whole thing. Stop. And then I'm going to put a router link here. And for the to expression, these colons, by the way, these are referred to as a vbind. You could also do vbind to, like that. That would work equally well, but also :2 works just as good. So let's go ahead and do that. So we want to go to facts / and then our fact ID, which you can use as fact.id. All right, and then we'll put the facts text in there. Fact.text. Okay, cool. And that's our template logic. So we can go ahead. Here's something like what our search page should look, our JavaScript for the search page should look like. Let's go ahead and implement that. So we already have our name. We need a data, which is a function that returns an object. Q, which will stand for query, will be a blank string, and results will be an array, because we're going to need multiple results, not just one result. Perfect. Okay. And then we're going to have this methods object down here. Well, what is the methods object? Methods is a list of functions that we can call from event listeners, or we can call them from the mounted function, or we can also call them from other methods. So generally, instead of having like one long piece of JavaScript or like a single function, in Vue we have multiple smaller functions that each have their own role. So let's go ahead and implement the methods. An object of functions, so don't confuse that. Data is a function that returns an object. Methods is an object of functions. It's a little bit confusing. So you defined this, well, I didn't put the key up listener. We'll search. So that's the function we're going to call. So let's go ahead and call that function. So let's do search. Let's define that. So let's go to our search logic here. All right. So first of all, we use E in this here. That one parameter E, that just means the event. So here we check if the event key pressed was enter. So if we press enter while we're inside that search box, then that will search. All right. So let's go, and then we have just another fetch, which is, it's the same principle as the other one, except instead of going to fact/id, we're going to fact/search/q, which stands for what we're searching for. All right. So if e.key is enter, make sure, also if you're following along, make sure that E is a capital E, because if it's not, then you're going to run into some major problems. All right, let's make another fetch request to Component API. mylt.repl.co. Or again, if you were in the previous workshop, then you are welcome to use your own instance of this. But if you made any changes during that workshop, remember that it's not going to be exactly the same. Facts, search, and then we'll need the query. This.query. All right, but then result, we'll convert that to JSON, and then we'll convert that data.
Cool.
Okay, your data, set the results to data.results. All right, and that's our search. So now, if all goes well, then we should be able to make a search. So let's pull this back up, go to search. Alright, something broke, so let's see what, did we set that to the right part in the navbar? /search, did we define that in the roots file? Ah, we're importing the wrong component. So search, okay. Now we can go to search. Alright, now we have the search bar, corn. We hit enter, okay, nothing's happening. Let's figure out why. Let's see here. Let's see, it looks like I didn't get the endpoint quite right. /search/query. Okay, that's unusual. Let me do some research on this. Ah, we forgot the V model. That was the problem. We gotta make sure we have the V model here. V model equals Q. That should work. Okay. Alright, there we go. Now we have a list of corn facts. And if we click the fact, then it should. No, not quite. It's not bringing us to the right location. So we're getting close. Ah, I just input a simple typo. It's fact, not facts. So, there we go. And that is it. It's debug time. We already did the debug. I should have gone to that screen a little earlier. But yeah, so now that we are done with that, congratulations. We have finished the Vue.js APIs workshop. And like I said, this is just a demo, so if you want to, come to PyraHacks. I'll send that in the chat one more time. Would love to have you. Yeah, PyraHacks is a great thing, so looking forward to it. Alright, see y'all later.